Hello and welcome to the Ryan Mack Show, live streaming, coming at you on YouTube, Facebook, and soon Rumble, hopefully, once I get that caught up. Today's episode is going to be packed. I've got a lot of information to bring you today. I got some insight from the debate that happened this week with GOP. We've got election results that suggest the GOP still has a long way to go. And of course, in order to understand the Hamas Israeli conflict now slash war, you need to understand who exactly is Hamas. This is the Ryan Mack Show, live coming to you. Support the show. Venmo listener support to the podcast on Spotify. You can catch me on YouTube and Twitter as well, now called X. But first, I want to talk to you about blackout coffee. So I don't know if you know anything about me. I love coffee, and I love coffee the right way, straight up. And if you're tired of Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, some of these places that don't really support your values, that give money to causes that you don't support, you need to try Blackout Coffee. They have a small batch company. They support American values. That's a robust flavor of coffee. I drink it every day. You get your a hoodie, a sweatshirt, a mug, and of course, one of the best coffees around. Also, check out their website. You can use the promo code to save on your first order, Ryan M10 there on the screen. So support the show that way and also get some good coffee instead of waiting from instead of getting the coffee from the shelf at the grocery store. You can get it right to your door. It's freshly roasted just days before shipping. So once again, blackoutcoffee.com, promo code RyanM10. So in order to understand the Israeli Hamas conflict going on in the Middle East, first of all, I'm going to use Kamala here as a reference. So Israel is a smaller country surrounded by even smaller territories in the Middle East, Gaza Strip and the West Bank. It controls those territories. They were land gifted to the Palestinians by Israel in exchange for peace. Except that Israel has not been given peace. They have been given violence instead. Uh, as recently as October, beginning of October, Hamas terrorist group launched an attack, went door to door to Israel, into Israel, slaughtered 1,400 people, raped women, kidnapped children, beheaded babies, just a violent display of bloodshed. And it really speaks to the volume of their rhetoric. Now, you've seen protests on college campuses, you've seen Palestinian protests at the White House, you've seen it all over our country and all over the world. But do they really know what they're supporting? So, to give you some insight, I've got a video pulled up here. Now, this is from CNN, but they are still presenting coverage in a fair way. And so don't take that the wrong way, but they also are towing the line that Hamas is a terrorist group. Now, Hamas is a terrorist group, militant arm of the Palestinian Authority, similar to Hezbollah, who is the militant army group in Iran. So these are the two groups of armed militia that these countries support. And their ideology basically states that eradicate the Jews, completely rid the earth of the Jewish population. And America and the Western civilizations are next. Anybody who doesn't support the Islamic way of life should be exterminated. That is their belief. So here is a CNN video of a propaganda video just breaking down the guerrilla warfare tactics that Israel's IDF and the U.S. Are going up against. So take a listen.
An Israeli armored vehicle advances to the Al-Shati refugee camp. But an ambush awaits. Moments earlier, the same video shows a Hamas fighter armed with a rocket-propelled grenade, moving slowly from behind the rubble. These are Hamas propaganda videos from the perspective of its fighters. showing Hamas militants peering around buildings and through the rubble before striking armored vehicles. CNN has geolocated several videos released in recent days to northern Gaza, in Beit Hanun, Atatra, and the Shati refugee camp, indicating Hamas is likely still mounting attacks in areas Israeli forces entered over a week ago. The videos provide a limited window into the group's guerrilla tactics, threats Israeli forces face as they move deeper into Gaza.
As we're moving in, we're fighting more and more close combat, urban combat type engagements.
The Israeli military says its forces have encircled and are now operating in the heart of Gaza City, where they face the dangers of dense urban combat and a vast network of tunnels Hamas fighters are using to sneak up on Israeli forces.
The nature of urban warfare is that they go down the tunnel and come up somewhere else, and that is exactly why we're moving slowly. We're not advancing. We're not rushing into this. We're taking strategic positions.
Israeli forces say they've destroyed 130 Hamas tunnel shafts like this one since launching their ground offensive.
We're just scratching the surface of that.
But many more still remain.
Recordings just stopped.
All right, so there you have obvious propaganda video by Hamas putting out there that this is what they are and this is what they support. Now, it's important to remember, those of you protesting for ceasefire, just what exactly you are supporting. Okay, so Hamas, like I said, is a militant group and it controls the Gaza Strip. An overwhelmingly large population of Palestinian people. So it is the Islamist militant movement and one of the two territories' two most major political parties. It governs more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The group is best known for their armed resistance to Israel. Earlier this month, I told you that 1,400 people and dozens more have taken into hostages, 1,400 people dead. Israel has since declared war on the group in response, and you've seen the ceasefire chants from the squad and the others around Congress. And quite frankly, the left's narrative is that Biden's not doing enough to halt the war. Israel has a plan, and it's the same thing Donald Trump supported when he took on ISIS. Destroy Hamas. They must be destroyed. Otherwise, you're going to see Israel being bombarded from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon. You're going to see these people destroy and completely wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Now, IDF is some of the Middle East's best defense against Hamas, but with the help of the United States, they can push them back, and that's what they're going to do. This is going to be a long campaign to wipe it out entirely. So dozens of countries have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization, though some would apply this label only to its military wing. Iran provides it with material and financial support. As we've known, Iran recently had $6 billion in funds unfrozen and then frozen and then unfrozen. We can't ever get the truth from the Biden administration, quite frankly, Iran either. Turkey also harbors some of its top leaders. Its rival party, Fatah, dominates the Palestinian Liberation Organization and rules the West Bank, which has also formally renounced the violence, though it has not always upheld that vow in times of tension. The split in leadership and Hamas's unwavering hostility toward Israel have diminished prospects for stability in Gaza. So, a background and origin story, Hamas was founded by the Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, a Palestinian cleric who became an activist in local branches of the Muslim Brotherhood after dedicating his early life to Islamic scholarship in Cairo. Late 1960s, he preached and performed charitable work in the West Bank and Gaza, both of which Israel occupied following the 1967 Six-Day War. Now, the leftists will say, well, occupation and control of the Gaza Strip and West Bank, that's wrong. And however, these were always part of Israel. These were gifted lands to the Palestinians in exchange for peace. In exchange for peace, they've thrown missiles and warfare back at Israel. So Yassin established Hamas as the Brotherhood's political arm in 1987 in December. Following the outbreak of the first Intifada, Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. So, Hamas's purpose was to counter the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another organization whose commitment to violently resisting Israel threatened to draw Palestinian support away from the Brotherhood. 88. Hamas published its charter calling, now get this, calling for the destruction of Israel and the establishment of the Islamic Society in historic Palestine. Palestine is not a place, it is not a country, it is a people, and it's ruled by Hamas terrorist group. And what observers have called an attempt to moderate its image, Hamas presented a new document in 2017 that accepted an interim Palestinian state along the Green Line. So, the border was established before the 6-Day War, but that still refused to recognize Israel. They refuse to be recognized. They don't want to allow Israel to remain a country, and it's biblical. This war that is taking place, whether you believe it or not, it's really biblical. Hamas first employed suicide bombing in April 1993, 5 months before PLO leader Yasser Arafat, a familiar name, and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin signed the Oslo Accords. Now, the historic pact established limited self-government for parts of the West Bank and Gaza under a newly created entity called the Palestinian Authority. Hamas condemned the accords, go figure, as well as the PLO's and Israel's recognition of each other, which Arafat and Rabin officially agreed in letters sent days before Oslo. Then again, in 1997, the United States designated Hamas a foreign terrorist organization. So they've been around for at least almost 30 years. The movement went on to spearhead violent resistance during the second Intifada in the early 2000s, though the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Fatah's Tanzim militia were also responsible for attacks against Israelis. So who are the leaders, the leadership structure? Most of his leadership bodies perform various political, military, and social functions. General policy is set by the overarching consulting body, which called the Politburo. It operates in exile. Local communities manage grassroots issues in the Gaza and the West Bank. So they have a unique, very structured set of leadership, similar to any other political militant wing. They have a very structured inlay. Ismail Haniyeh currently serves as a political chief, having replaced longtime leader Khalid Mashal in 2017. Haniyeh has operated in Doha, Qatar since 2020, reportedly because Egypt has restricted his movement into and out of Gaza. Hamas leaders established a presence in Qatar after falling out of the previous host, Syria. So they continue to find leadership places in these other Arab countries, but they continue to be taken out of these countries. I wonder why Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan refuse to open their borders to Palestinians who are fleeing the Gaza Strip. Why wouldn't they open their borders? It's because Hamas is interfering. The refugees participated in 2011 uprising that proceeded with the Syrian civil war. Some senior Hamas figures reportedly operate out of the group's offices in Turkey. So the day-to-day affairs in Gaza are overseen by Yahweh Sinwar. I can't pronounce that. I'm not very good at Islamic names. Previously was head of Hamas's military wing and served 22 years from an Israeli prison for masterminding the abduction and killing of 2 Israeli soldiers. He was among more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners freed in 2011 in exchange for Israeli soldier held by Hamas. As of June 2021, Gaza's de facto prime minister is Yassim Dalis. So they've got military commanders. Israeli forces assassinated the militia's founder, Salah Shahada, in 2002 airstrikes. 15 civilians were killed in the attack, focusing Israeli and international scrutiny on such tactics. Now, if you know anything about war and such tactics, there's going to be casualties. There's going to be civilians. Hamas is notorious for hiding behind hospitals and schools and daycares and civilian populations. They will hide behind you and they cower so that you can kill civilians and blame it on you. But this is all a byproduct of going to war. We know this. Israeli forces killed Yassin, Hamas's founder, in 2004. So, how is Hamas funded? Well, I've already mentioned earlier that Iran primarily is the one undertaking majority of the funding. It's designated as a terrorist entity. Hamas is cut off from the official assistance of the United States and the European Union that provide to the PLO in the West Bank. But historically, Palestinian expatriates and private donors in the Persian Gulf provide much of the movement's funding. In addition, some Islamic charities in the West have channeled money to Hamas backed social service groups, prompting asset freezes by the U.S. Treasury. So there have been restrictions on funding, but they continue to find ways to seek financial and donors and private fund. But the $6 billion that was unfrozen to Iran, and it was refrozen and then frozen and then unfrozen, you can't ever get a straight answer. But much of Iran's support is going into Gaza. Gaza's economic situation is already a third world country, and their assault on Israel recently and ensuing war is exacerbating the extreme poverty of its residents. It is Ethiopia. It is Africa. I mean, this isn't just some luxury strip in Israel that can thrive on its own if they were to keep the entire country of Israel. This is already a third world country, so to speak, with a militant radical Islamic group heading it. So it's no different than any other dictatorship or Marxist or socialist or communist regime. They do not support their own people. The two countries have maintained their blockade, cutting off the territory from most of the world, forcing out more than 1 million Gazan Palestinians to rely on international aid. Israel has allowed Qatar to provide hundreds of millions of dollars in assistance through Hamas. Now, there has been humanitarian aid pauses recently to allow humanitarian aid to come in to the region, but you can bet that is also taken up by Hamas. Other foreign aid generally reaches Gaza via the Palestinian Authority and UN agencies. For years after the blockade, even Hamas continued to collect revenue by taxing goods moving through a sophisticated network of tunnels that have circumvented the Egyptian crossing. This brings staples such as food, medicine, cheap gas for electricity production in the territory, as well as construction materials, cash, and arms. After Egyptian President al-Sisi took power in 2013, Cairo became hostile towards Hamas, which it saw as an extension of its chief domestic rival, the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Egyptian army has gotten involved. They've shut down and so this is you can already tell why some of the other Arab nations have not allowed Gaza to thrive because of Hamas. This is a very bad group, similar to ISIS and Al Qaeda. This is no different. And Hezbollah, they will not stop, and they don't fight traditional warfare tactics. They are a bunch of guerrilla warfare animals. That's what they're savages. Who cuts off babies' heads? They aren't people. So for those calling for a ceasefire on the left, you need to sit down and shut up. You anti-American hacks. You don't, whether you agree with some of the things that Israel has done over the years or not, this is a biblical war taking place, and it's one baited in truth in the Bible. There's no other way to explain it than that. This is biblical. Islamic regimes don't want Israel to exist, and that's the bottom line. So today, Iran, which is one of Hamas's biggest benefactors, contributing funds, weapons, and training through Iran, Hamas briefly fell out of order, backing opposing sides in Syria's civil war. Get this, Iran currently provides some $100 million annually to Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other Palestinian groups designated as terrorist organizations. So you know who's the number one primary backer of Hamas. It's Iran. You have to go back and cut off the snake and its head. You go back and fight Iran. That's who is supporting it. That's who is backing the destruction of Israel. And they will not stop until they do it. Iran has been quick to praise Hamas's assault on Israel late in October, pledging its continued support for the Palestinian group. Turkey has been another country that has backed Hamas and a critic of Israel, following President Tayyip Erdogan's rise to power in 2002. Now, it insists it only supports Hamas politically, but it's also accused of funding Hamas's terrorism, including an aid diverted from the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency. So, how does it govern? Well, it's been the authority in Gaza ever since Israel withdrew from the territory in 2005. The following year, they won the majority of seats in the Palestinian Authority's legislature and formed a government. It earned votes through social services it provided, and it has a rejection of the incumbent Fatah, which many voters perceived as having grown corrupt at the helm of the PLO and delivering little to Palestinians through its negotiations with Israel. So the outcome is Palestinians voted Hamas in without knowing anything about their militant wing. I really think that 70%, I think I saw 70% Palestinians support Hamas. That's a large number for people not really wanting to condemn this. They voted these people in. They voted these savages in. There's no way to look around it. The outcome was unacceptable to Fatah and its Western backers. The party ousted Hamas from power in the West Bank. In Gaza, however, Hamas routed Fatah's militants in a week of fighting, resulting in a political schism between the two Palestinian territories. Palestinians have not voted for a legislator since 2006, nor a president since 2008. So you have a population of Gaza about 2 million, roughly 360 square kilometers, roughly the size of D.C., Washington, D.C., on the southern Israeli border. Gaza City and is a major city there. You got borders with Egypt and Israel surrounding. You've got military borders that also stop these militants from coming across the border, even though they took them down really easily during the conflict. So as they took over the remnants of the Palestinian Authority institutions in the Strip, it established a judiciary and put in place authoritarian institutions. In theory, Hamas governs in accordance with a Sharia-based Palestinian basic law, as does the Palestinian Authority. So they based on Sharia law. But it generally has been more restrictive than the law requires, including controlling how women dress and enforcing gender segregation in public during the early years of its rule. The watchdog group Freedom House, founded in 2020, that the Hamas-controlled government has no effective or independent mechanisms for ensuring transparency in its funding, procurements, or operations. Hamas also represses the Gazan media, civilian activism on social media, the political opposition, non-governmental organizations, leaving it without mechanisms for accountability. They're not accountable to anybody but themselves. This is how regimes like this thrive, on restricting the flow of information and controlling the assets in the region. And then they continue to get sources from Iran who also call for the destruction of Israel. That's how this works. So how do Palestinians view Hamas? Well, according to a June 2023 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, showed that 1/3 of Palestinians considered the most damaging development for their people since the State of Israel's 1948 creation. The same poll found more than half of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank would vote for Hamas Haniyeh over PA President Mahmoud Abbas in presidential election, while just 1/3 of Palestinians would choose Abbas. Additionally, they've indefinitely postponed national elections scheduled for 2021, citing Israel's alleged refusal to let Palestinians in East Jerusalem vote, though observers suspect that Abbas aimed to prevent a likely Hamas victory. So how has Hamas challenged Israel? They fired rockets and mortars into Israel since the group took over the Gaza Strip in mid-2000s. Iranian security officials have said that Tehran will provide some of these weapons, but the Hamas gained the ability to build its own missiles after training with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and proxies. This is a proxy war. Iran's backed this. They're behind it. In recent years, though, Israel estimated that Hamas and other Palestinian groups in Gaza have about 30,000 rockets and mortars in their arsenal. The militants have flown balloons, incendiary devices towards Israel, which has sometimes caused fires. The group has also carried out incursions into the territory, kidnapping soldiers and civilians. Prior to the incident in 2023 in October, Hamas and Israel had their deadliest fight in years in 2021 when Hamas fired rockets in Israel following weeks of tension between the Palestinians and Israelis in Jerusalem. Some analysts say that Hamas wanted to bolster its reputation as the defender of Palestinian cause after the Palestinian Authority postponed the 2021 elections. Remember, the 11-day conflict, Hamas and the Authority, the Islamic Jihad group, fired more than 4,000 rockets from Gaza, killing 10 Israeli civilians and injuring more than 300 others. Hamas reportedly coordinated with the IRGC and Lebanon's Hezbollah during the fighting and used so-called suicide drones along with its useful arsenal of less precise missiles. The United States and Egypt brokered a ceasefire to the conflict. So, just take a minute and think to yourself, you're a crazed leftist, probably with blue hair. You don't like anything conservatives have to say. In fact, you want to shut them up and silence them. You don't like Israel. You think that they're an apartheid regime, as the squad members have called. Rashida Tlaib has called them, has made some anti-Semitic remarks. I mean, I can't think of anything else you would support other than the opposite of what everybody else says. So, of course, you're going to have pro-Palestinian protest. Of course, you're going to have violent anti-Semitic conflicts out of this. But if you're a blue-haired leftist who doesn't support Israel, who else would you support? Oh, a terrorist. That's who you would support. And you would call for a ceasefire because after 1,400 people would be massacred, killed, raped, beheaded, why not call for a ceasefire? Because that would mean Hamas would survive and then they can continue to harass and attack Israel and eventually destroy them. That's how this will work if I were a leftist. But I'm not, thank God. So how is this different? The attack on Israel in 2023? Well, it's not a lot different, but it began on October 7th on the Jewish Sabbath, an important Jewish holiday with Hamas launching several thousand rockets into southern and central Israel, hitting cities as far north as Tel Aviv. Militants also breached the heavily fortified Gaza border and infiltrated many southern Israeli towns and villages, killing some 1,400 people and wounding and kidnapping scores more. Hamas's military leader, Mohammed Deif, said the group undertook its assault because of Israel's long-running blockade of Gaza, its occupation of Palestinian lands, and its alleged crimes against Muslims, including the desecration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The October 7th attack is also the deadliest in Israel's 75-year history and has inflicted a deep psychological trauma on its people, with some analysts drawing comparisons to the surprise Pearl Harbor and 9/11 attacks on the United States. Both intelligence agencies from U.S. and Israel, I feel, have failed. It is completely unprecedented that a terrorist organization would have the capacity and wherewithal to mount such coordinated attacks from air, land, at sea. So this has been months in the planning. So Israel has declared war on Hamas, mounting a campaign. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned of a long and difficult war. But he also vowed to absolutely annihilate Hamas, as he should. The only way to stop a terrorist from continually terrorizing a country is to annihilate them from existence. So in the first few weeks of Israel's offensive, its forces have killed more than 8,000 Palestinians in the enclave. The Palestinians, again, they're going to be killed because it's in a war. 40% of them children. I don't agree with that. But again, you're having Hamas-controlled territories, and they're hiding underground. So you're going to kill troops. Some experts fear that a full Israeli invasion of Gaza could provoke a significant attack against Israel by Hezbollah, an Iran-backed militant group and political party in Lebanon. I've said this, but also you can't be afraid because of what the goal is. Your goal is to eliminate Hamas from being a problem. That has to happen. So if that's going to happen, and that is your goal, you have to continue to push forward. These college idiots that will sit there and yell out ceasefire, call you out, call you a racist, call you a bigot, and their anti-Semitic attacks, it's going to fall on deaf ears. It has to, and you have to push forth. But in order to understand the two sides of the issue, this is very biblical. Israel has been a nation going back some 2,000 years. It is biblical. God's promised land is in Israel. And Islam has branched off of Hagar and Abraham, and that has been the schism between Judaism, Christian values, and Islam. Islam and Hamas terrorist groups, Iran, and all the Arab nations. The extremists, anyway, believe that Israel should not exist as a nation. It is rightfully not their land. It is the Palestinians. They should be Palestine. So there's that, a little bit of background history on Hamas and who they are. It's important to note if you're going to have a side in an issue, you have to know who you're supporting and what it is you are supporting. If you support Hamas and you support this pro Islamic jihad terrorist organization, you're supporting evil, and you're supporting terrorism, and you're supporting anti-Western values and Judean Christian values. And you can't call yourself a Christian, even if you're left leaning, if you support Hamas and the Palestinian leadership. This is basic stance. All right. So, among other things we got to get to, first, I want to talk to you about this time of year. It can get kind of chilly, kind of breezy. I don't like to wear thick hoodies. I'm wearing shorts currently. I'm wearing a hoodie, but I also don't mind a nice fleece blanket. I want to tell you about 50 Shades of Fleece. My wife founded it. She ties fleece blankets together. She has whole kinds of creative designs. She's also branched into baby sensory blankets and sensory pieces. But 50 Shades of Fleece, check them out on Facebook. You can get a cozy blanket for Christmas, Thanksgiving, or support your favorite football team. Go crazy and even get a political blanket if you want. I've got a couple of the blankets. They're warm. I'm tall. I like at least a 50-yard blanket, so she can make those for free for me anytime. But check out 50 Shades of Fleece on Facebook and get yourself a warm, cozy blanket. All right. So, and among other things this week, I want to talk about. I know I was on with Speechless with Kev Ferris. Shout out to him and his show on Cities. We did an after GOP debate collab the other night after the debate. My thoughts, because I think I had a spot on there, but my thoughts about it real quick. Where is the GOP headed? The elections were the previous night before the debate, and they lost. Ohio, issue 1 was about abortion on the ballot in the state to amend the Constitution in the state of Ohio to enshrine the right to an abortion in Ohio. Previously a swing state, but now a solid red state. So abortion won again on the ballot. Is it really more a concern of abortion versus life? Or is it the messaging Republicans continue to get defeated? Are they confused on their stance? You have some candidates that have lost their elections by a mile because they couldn't tell you straight up where they stood. I'm vehemently and unapologetically pro-life. I believe that unless the life of the mother or child are in jeopardy, that abortions should not be a thing. They are evil and it's considered murder. You can disagree with me all you want. This is a free country, but I'm going to tell you that this is a hotbed issue for Democrats and Republicans. And ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, Democrats have used it to their advantage to gain some steam. Now, where does this leave the GOP? Yet again, an election that they should have won some of these key issues in these states, they lost. And I really think it comes down to a messaging issue. Where do you stand on abortions? You had some Republicans call for 6-week bans. You had some Republicans call for 15. Some said, well, maybe we should just not worry about it because it's a social issue and it should be left between the doctor and the mother. That's a leftist narrative. If you're going to be pro-life and you're going to be conservative, you have to have a stance of pro-life. You can't be wishy-washy. I'm tired of these squishy Republicans who have a leftist narrative talking about, well, we should just leave it alone, let the women decide. I'm for reasonable measures. If you find a consensus based on 15 weeks, do the science, do the math, when is viability a thing? Then I think you can have an argument, but it has to be across the board. You see Democrats have issues with their party as well. You've got far leftists, you've got Marxists, you've got communists, you've got socialists, and then you got the moderates. They all have one thing in common. They come together when it matters most. They have consensus, even though they disagree and they have factions in their party. Republicans have factions in their party. They've got moderates, and they have the strong conservative MAGA extremist type of the party. But there's no consensus. You have the Mitt Romneys, you have the establishments in control currently. So you're going to have a disagreement, but there's no consensus in the Republican Party. They're weak, and they continue to let the uniparty in Washington D.C. rule. If you're going to win elections, you have to have a defined, principled stance. You can't come out and have a leftist narrative and be wishy-washy. You're going to lose those elections. So Ohio was a rough one. There were some other state ones that had some issues, but they continue to lose, and I think it's because they don't have a unified message on principle. Conservatives want less government, they value pro-life, and they value freedom, and they support the Bill of Rights. If you don't have those basic principles, then you're not a conservative. There's a whole other list of other things that go into that, but shrink the size of government. You're pro-life. Marriage is between a man and a woman. There are two genders, and keep the porn out of schools of kids. That is literally the easiest thing you can do as a candidate. Fight for kids, fight for freedom, and fight for the values that this country was founded on. And that should be your stance. And I'm tired of these weak-kneed Republicans getting along to go along, and it's not winning. It's not a winning proposition at all. So I wanted to show you some highlights from the debate. Here is Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's see if I can share this. Here he was from the debate. I thought of the debate, I think here's what he won. I think Ron DeSantis won. However, I thought he had some good shots here. Listen in. Maybe. Let's see if we can get to listen. Maybe. All right. Anyway, I'll try to work on that in a minute. So I thought Vivek took some shots at the media, rightly. You've all seen the debate. We've watched it. Now, I still don't know. The jury is out on Vivek. I think between the three debates, I think he changed sides on how he wanted to attack. The first debate, he came out aggressive and he was attacking everybody. The second one, he was like, nah, I'm going to be nice and be cordial. And this week, he was more aggressive, going after Nikki Haley and going after Ron DeSantis. He's explosive. He's a well-spoken candidate. I don't know that he would fit in line with Donald Trump as the VP. I'm a Trump man. I'm a Trump guy. I voted for him twice. I'll vote for him again. I wish he would debate, but I think he at this point he doesn't need to. And I'm not going to tell somebody to debate if I don't think they should debate. It's up to them. As far as the GOP debate goes, I think Ron DeSantis won. I think his issues were that he's not bold enough on his campaign, but that's a different issue than debates. He's letting his record speak for himself. He didn't go on the attack because he didn't have to. He let Vivek come after him, and he showed, his record spoke for himself. So I think that overall, you're going to see some more fading. I hope Chris Christie's going to fall off here. Mike Pence has Tim Scott. I think nice guy, great character, great personality. I just don't think he's ready at this time. I think he might be a good cabinet pick. I think he might be a good VP. So it's remain to see what Trump will do with him. But he doesn't consider Tim Scott a threat. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. He thinks Nikki Haley or Vivek or Ron DeSantis is going to be more of a threat. At this race, I really think it's Trump's to win or lose. But but a lot can happen between now and March when the primary is here in Illinois. What Illinois will lean, obviously, we know it's a Democrat state, but there are still primary votes for the president going on. But it all comes down to November. Which candidate will be the best when November rolls? Is that going to be Trump? He's up big right now, but as you know, polls don't always show the answer. 2016 showed him losing by 99% to Hillary, and he ended up winning by a lot. So, can we really trust the polls? So that's one thing. My takeaway from the debate. I watched it. I watched Josh and Kev break it down. I thought it was all right, pretty clean. I thought Lester Holt was weak. I thought Kristen Welker was weak. That's what Vivek attacked him on. I wish I could play the video. Some technical difficulties. But you can see the clips. They're all over Reels or over YouTube. Vivek came out explosive. I thought he did a good job. But again, I don't know enough about him to really have, do I trust him, or is he just another one of those well-spoken Obama types where he'll say all the right things to get elected and then really do nothing what you ask? So there's my takes so far of the week. I think if you looking back on the recap here, if you're going to sit there and say we need a ceasefire because Israel is hurting Palestinians and they're shooting missiles and they're occupying territory, you need to look up the facts and you need to look up the history of Israel and the differences between the two regimes. Iran and the Arab nations, they have called for the destruction of Israel and the Christian values their entire time since their existence. They believe Islam is the way to go. And we cannot allow that as Americans because we are a nation of Christians primarily. And this country was built on Judean Christian values, and we have to support Israel. Now, the other side of that is the Ukraine battle. Well, do we support Israel and Ukraine? Do we support Ukraine? I mean, what happened there? Well, I don't agree with supporting Israel with money. I don't think we need to support them with military aid. I think they can wipe Gaza off the face of the earth if they wanted to, but we need to have readiness to prepare against Iran and Hezbollah's attacks as well. We need to show support unanimously. As far as financials, Ukraine should be cut off immediately. We don't have any goal in Ukraine. There's a difference between Israel and Ukraine. We don't have any goal of course, it's terrible to see Russia invade and take over a country. But where is our interest? Where is an American interest in Ukraine? No. There's no zero interest in Ukraine. You've got corrupt politicians in Washington, D.C. that have interest in Ukraine. Aside from having a sovereign country being invaded, I don't have a real general interest in supporting the war indefinitely. But that's where you have the American left. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. So the two differences in Ukraine and Israel support. So that's pretty much it for tonight on the main issues that I wanted to cover. Hamas, you need to understand who they are, what they support, the eradication of Israel. My thoughts on the GOP debate a little bit there and the elections in general and where GOP needs to go. I feel like you have to call out your conservative principles and be stern with them. I think you can't be wishy-washy. But I just want to also get into something else here that I found hilarious over the weekend. So this isn't one of those damn Bongino, this is what happened over the weekend rants, but this is a quick insight into some of the things I now experience being more involved in the political side of things and getting into arguments on Twitter. So I don't know. I don't know how I got started. I think, basically told one of the liberals on Twitter that I seen a post and I was like, abortion was murder. And all it took was about 200 more posts, retweets, yelling, screaming, clawing of the eyes, responses at me to suggest that, yeah, it was a good call. Abortion is murder. You are killing a baby, no matter how you label what the baby is. A fetus is the life cycle stage of the baby. It is still a baby in the mother's womb. There is no part of it that is not a baby. So abortion, and here's the thing on abortion, the issue, yes, I can speak of it from a white male. So unless again the life of the mother or the baby is in danger, abortion shouldn't be your first resort. But the left and most feminazis try to take the absolute rarest and rare form of cases that involve abortions and to validate and justify all abortions. So the comment that came back at me was, you know, fetus, it's not a baby. What about a mother who doesn't can't afford to have a baby, and just doesn't see a value of life to have for that baby or the mother because it could like Stacey Abrams said, it can economically impact the mother going forward because they could put her into poverty having a baby. And I'm going to be blunt with this because I'm tired of the argument, especially from the right and the left. There's really two arguments here. Unless the health and mother of the baby are in danger, abortion should be the last resort. It's not considered healthcare. It's not reproductive freedom. It's actually quite the opposite of reproductive freedom. It is murder on all accounts. Now, the other argument that I had over the weekend was that it's what about if the baby was born in the fallopian tube and the egg was caught there? That's not the same thing as that's not an abortion. You don't get an abortion because it was caught. That's an ectopic pregnancy. That's the difference. That's completely different, unrelated. You get an abortion when the baby's going to die, you're going to die. That's when I think that it's time to talk about termination of pregnancy. Everybody, about 90% of people I talk to hold my views, but there are some that I go, it should be a choice, pro-choice. You're pro-murder. That's what I think. I think that if you want to not have a baby, there are other ways in order to not have a baby, like birth control, which I know the screaming lefties are going to get at me and say, that's not effective. Yeah, 99% effective, but still effective enough. If you take it religiously, it can be an effective tool. Others, condoms, other contraceptives. Um, there's ways to prevent pregnancies, such as waiting until marriage to know if you actually really want to have kids. I get it. You can't control an entire population and tell them what to do with their bodies as far as sexuality, but that comes down to principles and morals as a country and as a people. It starts with the individual. You need to have an individual principles and morals to know, hey, do I want a child? Do I want not a child? If I get accidents happen, believe me, accidents do happen. You don't plan for things that there's been, look, plenty of marriages that have happened and are healthy, happy marriages that have kids that were maybe an oops, but they have kids. In the event that kids weren't wanted and they have an abortion, that was a choice to not act on the consequence of having sexual relations. You chose to have sexual relations. Therefore, you chose the consequences. Whether it's birth control failure or whether it's just you just didn't choose to use a condom one night or whatever the case, you chose to make the decision to enter the act, which can create life. I'm going to sit here and tell you, as a parent, if you choose to enact in a seemingly pretty regular act that involves the procreation of life, that's what animals do. They don't have relations for fun. They don't have sex for fun. It's literally productivity, reproduction. That's what the biblical design was. That's what God's design for marriage was, to be fruitful and multiply. And I think that no matter what your stance is on this, you need to have a deep inner moral conversation. And that's where that should be. But that's between, again, you, yourself, and you. That's all it comes down to. Nobody can tell you what to do, what you can say, where to go. Abortions are never going to be outlawed. They're never going to be banned. Just like when you ban guns, you're not going to get rid of gun deaths. It's not going to be a thing. But it's in a decision that you have to make. If you are going to take up the decision of getting involved sexually with another partner, and that partner is heterosexual, you're in a relationship and you're in sexual intercourse relationship designed for procreation, you take the responsibility of taking those risks if you don't protect yourself. That's just my thoughts on it. That's how I roll. So there's that. So that's all I know about life. Thanks for joining today. You can catch me on YouTube, Facebook. It'll be up shortly after the show, usually on Spotify, and Apple. I think Google, Twitter has it. I don't know how they display it on Twitter, but they do have it up there. So if you don't get the live version, you can catch the video on YouTube, Facebook. Rumble is up and coming. That is something I'm working out. But you can also catch the audio anywhere too, and I'll post it as many places as I can. So, like I said, thanks for joining me. Follow me, subscribe, like, share, and comment to the Ryan Mack Show on YouTube, Facebook, and beyond. Have a good night.